Hi, it's Wednesday again. That means your next installment in our Rosita Shawl Knit-Along with the Portland Community College Fingering Weight Fleece. I've gotten a little head start on you here. I have started the setup chart instructions. The last time I touched this, which it's almost harder to do a knit-along because not so much keeping up. For me, it's slowing down and not moving ahead. Now, if I were smart, I would just like videotape all these ahead of time, rack them up, and I would make the shawl in my speed, and you guys would get an installment every week. But instead, I am trying to do this along with you. So I try the best I can to do the topic you're going to be taught on that week, and then I put it down. So if you remember, the first topic was looking over the pattern, getting our wool, knitting a test swatch so that we got our gauge right. Gauge swatch, there's the word I was looking for. I can tell you that this is important. I was just talking to a gal that knit this already before I started this knit along, and she has a very loose gauge and didn't even think twice about it for a shawl pattern. However, when you have a very loose gauge and you have a kit with a limited amount of yarn in it, it's not a good idea not to do a gauge swatch. This gal ended up having to get another skein of, we upped our amount of skeins per kit. So you now have 3. So you do have wiggle room. But this gal needed a 4th and had a friend who also was knitting the Rosita shawl and actually had some left. So gauge swatch, gauge swatch, gauge swatch. Don't underestimate it. I have another friend that's knitting a sweater. She did a gauge swatch, but she did a sloppy gauge swatch. What is in a proper gauge swatch? I'm going to go over this a couple times now because this is so important. And believe me, I'm a recovering non-gauge swatcher myself. I didn't gauge swatch for years and years, but I'm converted, and it's because of all these incidences that I have my friends come into that it doesn't work. It's not a good idea. You'll run out of yarn. You'll end up with a garment that doesn't fit you. You'll be unhappy with the finished product. It's very important to do a gauge swatch so you at least have a good idea of the pathway you're headed down. So the friend of mine with the gauge swatch that is doing a sweater, she did a gauge swatch. It looked like she was pretty much on gauge. But then when she knit the sweater, she couldn't understand it because the sweater was so much bigger than it should have been. Now, 2 things happened here. One, she didn't look at ease. But regardless of that, the sweater was 8 inches larger than even the pattern's finished garment said. Well, she didn't block it ahead of time. Oh, excuse me. She didn't block it ahead of time, and she was off by just a little bit. But when if you do a 4-inch gauge swatch and the garment you're making is 40 inches and you're off by 1/4 of an inch, do that multiplication. You're going to be off by, 4-inch, 10 times as much. So 1/4 of an inch times 10, that's 2 inches that you're now off at the end of that garment, and then some, 2.5 inches. So really, really, really make sure, do a gauge swatch. Block your gauge swatch before you do your garment. You can use that yarn if you need it in the end. Don't feel like, oh, I can't possibly, I might run out of yarn. Do your gauge swatch. Cut it. Block it. Lay it flat. We're working flat here, so you're going to do a flat gauge swatch. Please, please, please do gauge swatches. All right, now that we've got that under our belts, I've gotten off that soapbox. Back to where we're at. We did a gauge swatch. We did a tab cast on, and that is, I'll show you that right here. I'm in the middle of a row because I've got something else to tell you. See this little edge here of garter stitch? That's our tab cast on, and what it does is it helps curve the top of your shawl so you don't end up with a bit that sticks out at the neck. I've seen many shawls with that in the design. I way prefer a tab cast on. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is the setup chart instructions. Now the setup chart in this pattern is on page 3 at the top. There are 15 rows to this chart. It just does a single of the motifs right at the top at the back of your neck. What we're going to do is work our way through that. If you're reading the chart, you do have a key. If you're reading the written instructions, odd rows, when you do an even row, it says in the instructions you just purl back. So I have gone through row 13 on this. So I'm ahead of you a little bit if you haven't worked ahead. And if you see, I'm still knitting with my straights. I'm loving my straights. I highly recommend using long straights for this shawl. One, you don't end up with the droop at the middle so that you can't see what you've done. My work, and I'm going to show you in just a minute, can all be stretched out right here. It's all even, and I can even see my yarn overs, so that when I am working this pattern, I will be able to see if I've made a mistake between the stitch markers, because you can just check visually, where am I supposed to have a yarn over? And I'm going to show you, look. There's a yarn over there. There should be a yarn over there. Another one after this stitch. So you can see them a lot easier on straights. Now, you don't have to convert, but I highly recommend it. All right, row 15 of the setup row is just to knit across. Oops, I dropped my stitch. Dropped one of my purl stitches. Let's turn that back around. That is one thing that I tend to do on straights. It doesn't happen as much on circulars. I think it's because when you're doing this rotation, that last stitch just drops off. Just hold it. All right, back. I'm going to knit across the entire final row. All right, I'm going to show you how to pit knit and explain how it works. All right, let's push this down. I've got a new camera set up. All right, so the way you pit knit is, oops, wrong. Let's see. I got to think about this now. Ooh. Yeah, pit knit here. You hold your yarn in your right hand. You hold, this is your working needle, your receiving needle. You use your arm to help guide your work. So I'm going to go ahead and slide into the knit position here with my needle, my working needle. I'm going to wrap around and off. Slide in, wrap around, off. And then a purl is just like you do a purl. So slide in, wrap around the back of the needle and off for a knit stitch. A purl would be, well, actually I'm going to wait. So there's a knit. All the way across we're going to knit. And you'll notice I'm showing you this while I knit because it's a little easier than doing a knit two together and a yarn over in a position that I don't knit with all the time. There we go. Move the marker over. Again, knit. What's kind of cool about this is that I'm not using my hands and my fingers so much. It's more of a whole upper body motion, right? Or there's more movement. But I'll tell you what, David's mom, she can knit so fast. And honestly, this is closer to, I've got to make sure and not stay out on the point. That is one important thing with these needles. This is closer to the traditional Shetland method. Instead of putting their needle in their armpit, they put it in a knitting belt down here. But the way the yarn is held and everything else is identical. This is as close as I can get without finding my belt to the Shetland method. There we go. So if you're watching this, alien, get out your needles and see if you can pit knit. You might like it better. The alien watches most of my videos with his wife. And I know he has knitting gear, and I know he's learned how to knit, but he doesn't know how to do the purl stitch. And never has learned. But I don't think he practices that much. All right. So we're knitting across, across. I'm going to do this in fast motion till we get to the end. And then I'm going to show you how to purl. Got to be careful not to be too tight with this method because it tends to pick up on the tapered part of the needle. I think sometimes a faster taper would be better. All right, a row of knit. Now we have to do a row of purl. Switch the needle that's under my arm. And a row of purl is just the same as it is if you knit continentally. course, I have to space these out. They're a little tight. I'm gonna have to loosen up. Usually I'm a loose knitter. All right, so we're gonna go through the front, not in between 2 stitches, but through the front. We're gonna go around the needle and then push our stitch through to the back. Well, I don't think I've purled this method before. Okay, there we go. Through to the back. There we go. And off. See, it's time for me to practice a little now. Through the side, around to the back. And this is my Continental coming out. I'm much more comfortable bracing with the finger that's on the that's holding one of the needles. All right, let's switch to a proper pit knit or combination. Through, around, and out. Through, around, and out. There we go. Around, out. Around and out. Around and out. Around and out. All right, let's see if we can give this to you in a slow motion way. Uh-oh, I have a knot in my work. Let's fix that, coming off the ball. There we go. All right, we're gonna show you the slow motion, hopefully. Let's shift the marker over. All right, we're gonna go, let's see if I can point it your way. Under the yarn, around the top needle, or the needle that's in your armpit, and then push back and out behind the needle. Around the top needle, push back and off. That's a purl stitch using the pit knitting method. There. And another segment's done. All right, we're going to go fast motion from here on out until I get to the end of this row, and then we'll talk about what's next. Hey, I'm back. I hope that pit knitting helps, and I hope all of you give it a try, because it is kind of fun, actually. You do need you need some long straight needles in order, or double pointed needles. If you can get 10-inch double pointed or 12-inch straight needles, that's what works best for pit knitting. So get a pair. You can get them used at Goodwill. Those are the old school needles that our grandmothers used. So this should work. You can get them cheap. Now, and you can get them at the store too. We do have pretty ones. The wooden ones I'm using are in the store, and I think they're like $5 a set. So let me know if you'd like to try some pit knitting. All right, the next thing that I'm going to prep you for so that you have the stitches that you need to finish this shawl. So I'm going to do some close-up work, fingers crossed I pull it off, of knit 2 together, slip, slip, knit, yarn over, and slip SK2P, which is slip 1, knit 2, pass the slipped stitch over the 2. So it's a double decrease, essentially, is what it is. I'm going to show you back-to-back samples of that, and then I'll close you out for the week. Okay, I've made a little mock-up of this so that you can see it easier. I'm going to show you the stitches you need for the project. Now, remember that you need to knit the first 5 and the last 5 on every row for this shawl. So we're going to knit the first 5. 5. And then slip the stitch marker. And then the next stitch, we're doing some of our increases. I've already done one here, so I'm going to do the next set for you. So this one we knit 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then knit front back. So a knit front back is knit in the front, wrap around to the back, and knit again, and then pull that single now into 1 stitch into 2 stitches off your needle. Okay, let's do that again. I'm trying to get this centered for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then knit in the front, and then wrap your needle around to the back and knit through the back loop, and then pull that stitch that was 1 into 2. Let me do it again. Into 2. And the last one before we do our second set of knit stitches. Knit front back, and then knit to the last stitches. There. Now, this shawl, every return row or every even row has a rest row. And the way that you finish the rest row is that you always knit the first and last 5, but in a rest row, we purl back always. So purl back. This is not a traditional Shetland technique. This is more some of the other region techniques, but it also is an easier knit. So, and then Kelly, of course, prefers a stockinette stitch on the front, not a garter stitch. So most of her designs do have purl rest rows in the back. There, 2. Okay. All right, the other stitches that you need to know for this, as soon as we get through this rest row, I'm going to show you just randomly along here. So they won't necessarily fit the lace, but you need to know the following stitches. Last of the purls, back across, and then knit the last 5 rows. I'm trying to remind you there. Don't forget, I've forgotten a couple of times. Okay, turn your work. Oh, looks like I dropped a stitch something down there. Doesn't matter, this is practice for me. We're gonna ignore that. All right. Trying to keep this in view. All right, so we have knit the first 5 stitches. Now 4, because that guy fell off, but that's fine. We're gonna knit into the edge, and that is to give you this solid stitch that won't curl. All right, you need to learn a knit 2. You need to know a knit 2 together, and the way we do a knit 2 together is go through 2 stitches, grab the yarn, and come out through the 2 stitches. And what you've done is a decrease, 2 stitches, go through 2 stitches, come out, and we've turned 2 stitches into 1. The other stitch that is important for this pattern, yarn over, or yarn in front is what they call it in the UK. So usually a yarn over. Yarn overs are always paired, or normally paired, with a knit 2 together or a slip slip knit. I've done 2 here, so it's not accurate, but a yarn over, and usually they're followed with a slip slip knit or a knit 2 together. That was a slip slip knit, and I'll show you that again. Slip onto your needle, slip onto your needle, and then you put your receiving needle in the front, hook around, and knit through the back loop out. That's a slip slip knit. So slip slip knit. It is a newer version of what we used to do. Historically, this stitch would have been slip one, knit one, pass that slip over the one. And that they look very similar if you look side by side. This one's a little more poofy. The last stitch I'm going to show you is a double decrease. Slip one, knit two together, and then take that slip stitch and put it over the stitch you've just completed. Slip one, knit two together, and then take that last stitch, the slip stitch, and put it over the stitch you just completed. Slip one, knit two together, and take that last stitch and slip it over. Slip one, knit two together, and take that last stitch and slip it over what you've just completed. That's a double decrease. And in the pattern, it is, the initials for it are SK2P. SK2P is that stitch. All right, that's it for me. Apologies for my hand slipping off to the right bottom side on those overhead shots. I'm working on it. I'll continue to work on it, and maybe by the time we're done with this shawl, you will learn all these stitches and I will learn how to keep my hands under the camera. I did multiple goes at it, hoping that at least for one of the shots on my hand that you got a full view of the stitch. Also, noises in this house with the construction going on. So I did my best, but if I carry on doing it over and again, you'll never get a video. I'm already at this 2 days. You should have got this yesterday, but it was so bad yesterday with all the interruptions that I held it off till today. But that's it for me today. If you like this video and you want to stick with my progress and your progress and improving videos and knitting, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Make sure you ring the bell so you get notified of the next iteration. This is it. This is lesson 2 for the Rosita lace knit-along, I believe. I think so. It is the setup rows. Next week will be round 1. Definitely come see that one. It's a little tricky. I've already started working on it, and I can tell you I'm still working on figuring some of those instructions out. So come back and talk to me. I'll have them figured out by then. In the meantime, knit, have fun. On Saturday, I'll upload another vacation pic. We should be in Oslo. Yeah, Oslo will be your next video. So beautiful museum I got to go see. So hang tight and come watch it. I'll see you on Saturday and then next Wednesday for the knit along. Bye.